Welcome to Deep Dive into Knowledge.
The Invisible War for Survival. The Science of Bird Preening.
Hello, and welcome to Deep Dive into Knowledge. I am glad you have chosen to join us today. I'd like to begin by asking you to visualize a scene with me. It's a scene you've likely seen hundreds of times, probably without a second thought. Picture a bird. It's perched on a branch. Maybe it's a starling in your garden or a pigeon on a city fence. It isn't singing, it isn't hunting for food. It's just sitting there, twisting its neck at what looks like an impossible angle and burying its beak deep into its own feathers. It nibbles, it smooths things over, it might ruffle its wings, shake them out, and then it starts all over again. To us, it just looks like a moment of, well, vanity. Or perhaps just a bit of casual grooming, like a cat licking its paw. But if you watch closely, really closely, you can see the intensity. The bird is so methodical, it's relentless. We often just dismiss this as simple cleaning. But the sheer scale of it is staggering. There are birds that spend up to 25% of their waking life just doing this. 25%. That's 6 hours a day. Now, just think about that for a moment. In the wild, energy is the most precious currency there is. Time spent sitting on a branch is time you're not eating or finding a mate, and crucially, it's time you're exposed to predators. So it raises a really significant question. Why on earth would an animal driven by the brutal logic of survival spend a quarter of its life just combing its hair? So that's what we're going to dive into today. We're going to explore the hidden biology of what's called preening. We're going to find out that this simple act involves, everything from architectural engineering to chemical warfare and even how essential vitamins get made. It is not vanity. It's the invisible, constant work of survival. And to help us unpack all of this, I have our expert guide with me. So we see this behavior absolutely everywhere, but what is physically happening when a bird preens? Surely it's more than just wiping off a bit of dust.
Yes, you're absolutely right to question the dust theory. It's so much more than that. To really get it, we have to completely change how we think about a feather. I think from a distance, or even when we pick one up, we tend to see it as a solid object, like a leaf or a little piece of paper. Mm-hmm. But under a microscope, a feather is an incredibly complex piece of engineering. It's not solid at all. It's more of a fractal structure.
Like fractal structure.
Yes. Yeah. You have the central shaft, the stiff spine running down the middle, which we call the rachis. Then branching off from that shaft, you have hundreds of smaller strands. Those are called barbs. And then branching off those barbs are even tinier structures called barbules.
So it's a bit like a tree. You have the trunk, then the branches, and then the twigs coming off the branches getting smaller and smaller.
Exactly. But this is where the genius of the engineering comes in. These tiny barbules, they have microscopic hooks on them. The best analogy is it's like Velcro, but a kind of biological Velcro that's far more sophisticated than anything on our shoes.
Oh.
And when the feather's in its perfect state, these millions of tiny hooks interlock. They zip all the barbs together. And that's what creates that smooth, airtight, and watertight surface we see.
Right, so it's a mesh that locks itself together to form a kind of continuous shield.
Precisely. But of course, a bird's life is very active. Flying, moving through bushes, even just sleeping. All that causes these hooks to come apart. The Velcro, you could say, gets ripped open.
Ah, I see.
When that happens, the feather loses its shape. It becomes ragged. And for a bird, a ragged feather is a complete disaster. It means air can't flow smoothly over the wing, which destroys lift. It creates drag. It means waterproofing fails, and cold water can get to the skin.
So the preening, that's the repair work.
Yes. When you see a bird passing a feather through its beak, it's not just cleaning. It is physically rezipping those thousands of tiny hooks. It's mechanically repairing the structural integrity of its main survival tool. It's very tedious microscopic work.
That completely changes the image in my head. It's not grooming, it's maintenance. It's like a pilot checking every single rivet on an airplane before takeoff, but they have to do it every few hours.
Yeah, if they stop, even for a short time, the consequences are severe. They lose body heat, their flight becomes inefficient. They can essentially lose the ability to function. And that's why the drive to do it is so incredibly powerful.
That really puts the time commitment into perspective. I mentioned 6 hours in some cases, which sounds extreme. Is it that high for all birds?
It's remarkably high across the board, but there are big variations depending on the bird's lifestyle. On average, if you look at birds globally, they spend about 9% of their day on body maintenance. Preening is the vast majority of that.
9% of their entire day.
Yes. Imagine spending nearly a tenth of your day every single day, just making sure your clothes are stitched together properly. That's the baseline.
And what about the extremists?
Well, you mentioned that 25% figure earlier. That data actually comes from the common loon. Because they're water birds, they rely on perfect insulation to survive in freezing water. So they spend 6 hours a day preening. If they miss a spot, the cold water hits their skin and hypothermia.
6 hours? That's essentially a full-time job.
It is. Some gull species, especially when they're breeding, can spend 4 hours a day at it. It's an obsession because it absolutely has to be.
Is there an opposite to that? Are there any birds that just don't bother as much?
There is, and it's a fascinating exception that really proves the rule. We call them the ratites.
The flightless birds.
Exactly. Ostriches, emus, cassowaries. Because they don't fly, the aerodynamic perfection of their feathers isn't as critical. They don't need that airtight seal to generate lift. And when we study ostriches, we find they spend less than 1% of their time on this kind of maintenance.
Less than 1%.
Right. And if you look at an ostrich feather, it looks shaggy and loose, fluffy. That's because they don't have that urgent need to keep the Velcro zipped tight, so it creates a very clear link.
Yeah.
The more a bird relies on flight and waterproofing, the more time it has to sacrifice to preening.
That makes perfect sense. The ostrich can afford to be a bit scruffy because it's running, not gliding.
I want to move to another layer of this, though. We've covered the mechanical zipping, but you often see a bird reach back to its tail, nibble something, and then rub his head all over its body, and it looks like they're applying something. What is that? There's an oil involved, isn't there?
Yes, this moves us from engineering into chemistry.
Mm.
Most birds have an organ called the uropygial gland. It's located right at the base of the tail on the upper side. You'll see a bird turn its head all the way back, nudge that area, and then resume preening. What it's doing is getting this gland to secrete a very specific waxy oil.
And it's not just a lubricant for the feathers. Oh no, it's a multifunctional survival fluid. Its most obvious job is waterproofing. It coats the feathers and makes water bead up and roll right off. For a duck or a pelican, this is absolutely non-negotiable. If their feathers got waterlogged, they'd be too heavy to fly, and they'd lose all their insulation.
Okay, so waterproofing is key.
But the oil also acts as a conditioner. Feathers are made of keratin, the same stuff as our fingernails. And just like fingernails, keratin can get brittle. It dries out. The oil keeps the feathers flexible, which stops them from snapping under the huge pressure of flight. A brittle feather is a broken feather, and a broken feather is useless.
So it keeps the machinery lubricated and flexible. But there was something else about this oil that I found genuinely shocking, something to do with nutrition. Can you explain that connection? It sounds almost impossible that an oil on the skin could create vitamins.
This is where it gets really fascinating, and it's a fact that catches almost everyone by surprise. The oil is part of a complex nutrient cycle. The secretions from the gland contain precursor chemicals, so inactive compounds. When the bird spreads this oil on its feathers and then sits in the sun, ultraviolet light from the sun hits those chemicals, and a photochemical reaction happens right there on the wing. The sunlight converts those precursors into vitamin D.
Wait, so the vitamin is created on the feathers, not inside the bird's body?
Exactly. It's synthesized externally. So think about the process. The bird spreads the oil. It sits in the sun, which to us just looks like it's resting. But it's actually baking a vitamin supplement on its own body. Later, when it preens again, it ingests that oil, which is now rich in vitamin D, by passing the feathers through its beak.
That is incredible. It's a completely closed-loop dietary system. They harvest sunlight, turn it into a vitamin on their wings, and then eat it.
It's a brilliant bit of biochemistry, isn't it? It really changes how you look at a bird just sitting on a fence in the afternoon. It's not just loitering. In a sense, it's cooking its dinner.
So we have mechanical repair, waterproofing, conditioning, and vitamin synthesis. But I understand there's also a medical side to this oil. It's not just about flexibility and vitamins, is it? I recall reading something about bacteria.
Precisely. This is an area where our understanding has evolved quite a bit, even very recently. For a long time, we focused on the mechanics and waterproofing because those are, obvious to our eyes. But feathers are organic material. They are prone to colonization by bacteria, by fungi. There are specific types of bacteria that are keratinolytic.
Meaning they eat keratin.
Yes, they literally eat the feather material. If they're left unchecked, these bacteria will degrade the feather, eating microscopic holes in it and destroying that careful structure we talked about.
So the bird is literally having its clothes rot off if it doesn't clean them.
In a manner of speaking, yes. A study published as recently as March 2024 shed some new light on this. Researchers looked at the Indian peafowl peacocks and peahens. They found a direct correlation. The female birds that spent more time preening had significantly lower amounts of bacteria on their feathers.
So the oil is a weapon.
It is. The oil from the uropygial gland contains antibacterial and antifungal agents.
So preening is effectively a medical procedure. It's not just brushing your hair, it's applying an antibiotic ointment.
It's applying a layer of antibiotic ointment to the entire body every single day. And the birds seem to know this. There have been experiments with pigeons where researchers artificially increased the bacterial load on their feathers. The pigeons could sense it.
Really?
Yes, perhaps through skin irritation or some other way, and they immediately increased their preening. They knew their ecosystem was out of balance, and they went to work to fix it.
That implies a level of self-awareness about their own health that we don't usually give birds credit for.
It does. And this has huge implications for mating as well. When a female looks at a male, she's not just looking for bright colors. A bird with shiny, smooth, well-kept feathers is sending a signal. It's saying, I am healthy, I am free of parasites, I have good genes because I have the energy to maintain this.
And a dull feather is a bad sign.
A bird with dull, frayed feathers is signaling that it's covered in bacteria and can't maintain itself. So, in a way, preening is also about maintaining a visual signal of fitness.
It seems that every single aspect of the bird's life flight, health, nutrition, mating, it's all tied back to this one repetitive act. I want to shift the focus slightly from the solitary bird to the flock. We often see birds preening each other. It looks very tender, almost affectionate. Is this just a social thing, or is there a practical reason for letting another bird peck at you?
It is one of the most endearing behaviors to watch, isn't it? We call it allopreening, mutual grooming. And you're right, it looks affectionate because it does create a bond, but its roots are deeply practical.
How so?
Well, think about the anatomy of a bird. It has a beak on its face. It can reach its wing, its chest, its tail.
And not its own head.
It cannot reach its own head. It can't preen its own neck. These are the hard-to-reach spots. And yet, the feathers on the head suffer from the same parasites and the same wear and tear as everywhere else. So they need a partner.
So it's the classic, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Or in this case, you preen my head, I'll preen yours.
Exactly. In a mated pair, or a close social group, one bird will gently nibble the head and neck of another. It's providing a service the other bird just can't do for itself. But beyond the mechanics, there's a huge element of trust involved. You are allowing another animal to put a sharp beak, which is essentially a weapon, right next to your eyes and your jugular vein. You have to be completely relaxed to allow that.
That's a very good point. A beak can crack a seed shell. It could easily damage an eye.
So it builds the pair bond. It reduces stress and releases endorphins in the bird's brain. It's very similar to social grooming in primates. There was some wonderful work done by Dr. Irene Pepperberg, famous for her research with African gray parrots. She noted that her parrots viewed their human caretakers as part of their flock.
Ah, right.
So when a parrot lowers its head and asks for a scritch or a tickle, it is asking for allopreening. It's treating the human hand as a kind of surrogate beak.
I think anyone who's owned a parrot knows that exact gesture. The head goes down, the feathers fluff up.
Dr. Pepperberg even noted some parrots prefer a spoon to be used for this, as the tip feels a bit like a beak. And this is vital for something called pin feathers.
Pin feathers.
When a bird grows a new feather, it comes out wrapped in a hard keratin sheath. It looks like a little plastic spike. And it's very itchy and uncomfortable for them. The bird needs to crack that sheath to let the feather unfurl. If that pin feather is on top of its head, it can't do it. It needs a partner or a human with a spoon to gently crack that sheath open and relieve the itch. It's a very specific, tangible need that drives that social bond.
The image of a parrot asking for a spoon tickle is quite delightful. It really changes how you see them. I'd like to address a common myth. If I were to ask you to picture a bird that's obsessed with grooming, you might think of a flamingo. They always seem to be fussing over themselves. Are they the champions of preening?
That is the common assumption, yes. The flamingo is the archetype of the vain, well-groomed bird. But, science has a way of overturning our assumptions. In August 2024, a study came out from the University of Exeter that actually measured this. And it turns out flamingos are just average. They're middle of the road. The real champions are the pelicaniforms.
And that group includes?
Pelicans, cormorants, and gannets.
Why them? What makes a pelican need more grooming than a flamingo?
It all comes down to how they interact with the water. A flamingo stands in the water, it gets its feet wet, maybe its head when it's feeding. But a gannet or a cormorant, they dive. They plunge their entire bodies underwater repeatedly, often from great heights. They get absolutely soaked.
Ah, I see.
Their need for waterproofing is far, far more extreme than the flamingos. If a cormorant's waterproofing fails, it gets cold and heavy very, very quickly. So they have to invest significantly more time in reapplying that oil and zipping those feathers shut. It's a case where the environment dictates the behavior. The wetter you get, the more you preen.
The environment drives the behavior. That makes me wonder about the extremes of biology. We've talked about wild birds, but humans have interfered with bird genetics for centuries. Is there an example where this need for feather maintenance is taken to an absolute extreme? Something where the biology is pushed right to its breaking point?
There is. And it's a rather tragic but beautiful example. It's a Japanese breed of chicken called the onagadori. These birds have been bred for centuries to have a specific genetic mutation. It's called the NM, or non-molting gene.
Non-molting, so they never lose their feathers.
Specifically, their tail feathers. In a normal bird, tail feathers grow, stop, and eventually fall out to be replaced. In the onagadori rooster, the tail feathers never stop growing. They don't molt. They just keep getting longer and longer and longer.
How long are we talking about?
Under the right conditions, they can grow up to 12 meters long. That's 40 feet.
40 feet! A chicken with a tail longer than a bus. That sounds impossible to manage.
From a maintenance perspective, it's a complete nightmare. In the wild, this bird wouldn't survive a single day. The tail would snag, get dirty, the bird would be eaten. But in Japan, they're protected as a special natural monument. To keep these feathers from being destroyed, the roosters are kept in special high-rise boxes. Their tails hang down freely so they don't touch the ground.
Goodness.
The breeders and the birds themselves have to engage in extreme maintenance. The tails are often rolled up and tied with silk to keep them safe. But the bird still has that instinct to preen. Can you imagine the workload of trying to maintain 40 feet of feathers? It's the ultimate example of how high maintenance feathers can be and how that pushes the biological limits of an animal.
That is a staggering image. A 40-foot tail that needs its own special architecture just to exist. It really underlines the burden of these structures. We're coming towards the end of our time. When you step back and look at all of this, the mechanics, the chemistry, the social bonds, the sheer hours invested, what's the bigger picture? How should we think about this next time we see it?
I think it ultimately brings us back to the concept of entropy. A feather, once it has grown, is a dead structure. It has no blood supply, no nerves. It can't heal itself like skin or bone can. If it breaks, it stays broken until the next molt, which might be a year away. And yet, this dead structure is the only thing keeping the bird alive. It's the only thing standing between the bird and the freezing rain, or the predator it needs to outfly. So the bird is locked in this constant, unending battle against degradation. It is fighting physics. Every time it preens, it is fighting the chaos of the universe, trying to restore order in its feathers for just one more day.
That's a powerful thought. They're fighting entropy one nibble at a time.
Exactly. If they stop for even a few days, they die. It's that simple. So preening is not a chore. It's not vanity. It is the fundamental act of staying alive. It's the invisible work that allows flight to happen.
Fighting the chaos of the universe. That's a profound way to see a sparrow in a hedge. We've journeyed from the microscopic hooks that hold a wing together to the chemical synthesis of vitamins in the sun, all the way to the trust required to let another bird break a pin feather on your head. The next time you see a bird twisting to reach a spot on its wing, or a pair of doves grooming one another on a wire, I hope you'll see it differently. You are watching a sophisticated, high-stakes survival ritual refined over millions of years. It's a reminder that in nature, nothing is ever passive. Even the act of sitting still requires immense effort. We will return soon with another deep dive into the hidden complexities of our world. Until then, take a moment to reflect on the invisible work happening in the nature all around you. Thank you for listening.